The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
You're now about to witness the
it's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am, of course, your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Thursday. Yeah, I should know it's Thursday because that means tomorrow is Friday. Living for the weekend, May 19th, 2016. Thank you so much for joining us. You could have been anywhere in the world today, but you decided to spend some time with us, and I greatly appreciate that. Tonight, I want to talk about a little bit of everything. It's a broad range of topics. I'm going from covering the polls, the latest poll results showing Donald Trump not only closing the gap, but taking the lead in his second poll this week ahead of Hillary Clinton. I want to discuss Egypt Air Flight. I don't want to say the wrong flight. I believe it's 804. Flight A04 from Paris to Cairo that has disappeared. I also have an interview with Matt Bruenig. He is a writer for Demos, and he is also a writer on his own blog, mattbruenig.com. So he's joining me today. And last but not least, I want to honor someone who's been very influential in my life, El-Haj Malik El-Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X. So I want to talk a little bit about Malcolm X before the end of the night. You can join the conversation because we're going to do probably a 30-minute interview with Matt Bruenig. I want you to join the conversation 857-600-0518. Let us talk about the polls. So right before the show started, I got a notification from Reuters saying that the Democratic Party is concerned that Donald Trump is going to get an advantage because of the Bernie or Bust movement. And I guess finally, and honestly, I'm not going to say finally for the Democrats, the DNC and the people in power. I believe they have been paying attention to the polls all along because they know that the scientific polling really does give you a projection of what's coming and gives you the opportunity to adjust course based on the polling. It's just the rank and file member who happens not to like what the polls looks like. That all of a sudden will say something along the lines of, I don't believe in polling. So I believe, so what I'm getting ready to say is really based on, I'm saying that the DNC is finally publicly paying attention to the polls. They're putting this out that they're concerned. So this just came out this afternoon. They're concerned that the Bernie or Bust movement is going to hurt Hillary Clinton. And to be honest with you, they knew this all along, right? We knew that there was polling done several months ago that 33% of Bernie Sanders supporters said that they would never vote for Hillary Clinton. So we've known for quite some time that the Bernie or Bust movement, those who, whether they call it Bernie or Bust or something else, they were never going to go along with Hillary Clinton. And so now this polling came out from Fox News and Rasmussen, both of those polls showing that Donald Trump has taken the lead in those two polls, and he has closed the gap in the real clear average of polls. Now they're coming out with this saying that they're concerned about Bernie or Bust. They are not saying this as though they are genuinely shocked and concerned that, oh my goodness, these polls are here all of a sudden, because they've been paying attention to the polls all along. They're saying this so that they can preemptively use this to try to force Bernie Sanders out before the convention. And they're laying the groundwork for blame Bernie Sanders supporters like we blame Ralph Nader supporters. So they're just laying the groundwork to cover their asses, essentially. That's what's going on. So I not surprised by I want you to take a look at these polls. And I don't know how clear this is on your screen. It is actually rather small for myself. Wow, I didn't do good on that graphic, but I digress. But you can see the blue is Hillary Clinton, red is Donald Trump. This is the real clear average of polls for this week. Hillary Clinton, remember when Hillary Clinton had this big 11-point spread in the average? Her spread has come down. I had to look closely. I had to get closer to 3.1 points on the average of polls. CBS has her beating Trump by 6 points. Fox News has her losing to Trump. This is the one that just came out today, losing to Trump by 3 points. Rasmussen has her losing to Trump by 5 points. The Gravis poll has Hillary up by by 2. And the PPP poll has Hillary up by 6. The PPP is traditionally a Democratic poll, and CNN ORC is the biggest spread of all, has her up by 13 points. But the average, which everyone looks at, she has dropped significantly on the average of polls, and Donald Trump is closing the gap. So in the poll that has everyone worried is the Fox News poll. Trump is at 45%. Hillary Clinton is at 42%, which is in the margin of error. But the problem is the same exact poll last month had Hillary Clinton up 48% to 41%. And so in 1 month's time, she has dropped. She has lost 3 percentage points to. No, I'm sorry. I said that completely backwards. It has completely flipped. She had 48 last month. He had 41%. He gained 4 points. She lost 6 points. And now he is winning according to the Fox News polls. Now, before any Hillary Clinton troll, or maybe not a troll, but somebody who says, oh, that's a Fox News poll. All right, Fox News has 2 different types of polling. They have their polling that they do during their shows. That is a poll of all of Fox News viewers. They actually, believe it or not, engage in some scientific polling, which this is. This is representative of their scientific polling. But still, I'm quite sure you have at least 10,000 people right now across social media land dismissing this poll as, that's nothing but Fox News. However, the DNC has finally pulled out its big guns against Bernie Sanders by admitting that the polling does not look good and that they believe that the Bernie or bust movement is going to hurt Hillary Clinton. All right, let's take this caller. Caller, you are, hang on a second, that's not the caller I want. Right here is the caller I want. Caller, you're live on the air. Tell me your name, comment, and or question.
Hey, Ben, it's Bryce. How's everything?
Hey, Bryce, everything's going good, man. What's on your mind?
Well, it's funny how they're going to blame Bernie or bus supporters, but it's their fault because they rigged the election. They knew that Bernie, not only is the best candidate, but if he won, we would get the progressive change, we would get, the important change, and they rigged it, and then they want to blame Bernie because, no one much likes Hillary or trusts Hillary, but that's their fault. That's Hillary's fault for her actions. And so to blame Bernie, no, blame Hillary. It's Hillary's fault. Hillary, is what she is, and, Trump is taking advantage of that. And yes, obviously, there's a lot of other issues, factors why Trump is winning, but, it's just like to blame Bernie or to have a blame game is just full of crap to me. But it's just crazy.
I agree. I think I agree with you about 99%, Bryce. For me, it is the only thing I want to say about that is I don't think the election was rigged. I think the rules were set up to make sure that no grassroots candidate actually could stand a chance. This is essentially what Debbie Wasserman Schultz said in the interview. Actually, this is exactly what she said. So I want us to be very, very, very specific in our language, and I'll tell you why. To say the game is rigged means that it gives the connotation that they are cheating. They aren't cheating. they're operating by the rules that they set up years ago to make sure that people like you and me and people who are grassroots would never stand a chance against their machine. These are their rules. Their rules are worth shit, right? Their rules are crap. Their rules are not democratic. Their rules are not equitable. Their rules do not represent a true democracy. Everything is wrong with their rules, even with the structure of superdelegates, right? Yes, that is true. However, these are their rules. So the game is not rigged in the sense that they're cheating. The game is rigged because they have baked rules into the system to fight back against any candidate that the establishment doesn't want. And I want us to, the reason I make that distinction, and thank you, Bryce, for bringing that up. The reason I make that distinction and I make it so firmly is because as we progress and go forward, you have to understand we're playing by their rules. And it's either you beat them at their own rules, you go off and play a different game altogether, or you take over and change their rules. Those are really the only options. You either say, okay, I'm never dealing with the Democrat Party again. I am going to go Green Party, or I'm going to go fully independent. Or you say, we're going to beat them at their own rules. Keep the rules exactly as they are. We're going to beat them at their own rules. Or you're going to say, I don't like these rules, and I'm going to take over the party, and we're going to write our own rules. Those are really your only three options. Or you could, the fourth option, which is just, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to sit down. I'm not really going to participate at all. Right. So those are your options. So I want to reiterate, though, that everything that they have been doing is within their rules. And think about that. This is the way they sit around thinking. They think about how they can protect their structure. That's on the forefront of their mind. How can they protect their structure? What rules can, because in Nevada, for example, the rule that was, or the thing, let me call it a thing, the thing that disappointed and made people angry the most was when the DNC chair, not the DNC chair, but the Nevada state chair woman said that this is the ruling of the chair. The ruling of the chair cannot be contested. The ruling of the chair cannot be overturned. And I vote with the yeas. That was beyond undemocratic. That was beyond unfair. However, these were the rules that they put in place to protect themselves. And I just want to reiterate, you're either going to walk away and never deal with them so you don't ever have to be concerned with their rules, or you're going to get in there and beat them at their own game, or you're going to get in there and rewrite the game and make the rules yourself. I'm personally more interested in, never mind, I'm going to keep my interest to myself, but those are the options before you. All right. 857-600-0518 if you want to join in the conversation. I want to talk just briefly about Egypt Air Flight 804 from Paris to Cairo disappeared from radar on Thursday morning. There were reports that debris from the flight had been found, but that was an incorrect report. The wreckage is from some other vehicle, but it did not belong to Flight 804. Egyptian Civil Aviation Minister stated that the cause is more likely terrorism than mechanical failure. By the Egyptian minister saying this, this has unleashed a bevy of speculation from everyone. This reminds me of MH880. I think I have the wrong flight number, but Malaysia Airlines flight that disappeared and was never to be found. I think they're just now finding pieces of it almost 2 years later. But the speculations run wild when there's no concrete evidence. There was a loss of communication, and their last location on the radar is where they found debris. However, that debris is not connected to the flight. So we'll keep our eyes on this as the story develops. Again, there was a lot of speculation that this could be an act of terrorism, but no one has come forth to claim responsibility for this. And so that leaves a lot of room for speculation. And one thing our media is good at doing is speculating and filling in the gaps when they don't have anything substantive or verified to state. So I'll simply state that this is all the information we have right now. All right. 857-600-0518. Coming up soon, I'll be speaking with Matt Bruenig. He's a great writer. I really like the way he writes. And I like what he says, and I like the fights that he takes on head on social media. So we'll be speaking with him right at 9:30. Let's take this call. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Ben, this is Nicholas from Oregon.
Nicholas, how are you, man?
Oh, I'm doing good. So I was just tuned into your show, and you said something about, which I totally agree with, about how it's not so much that the game is rigged so much as it's their rules, and that's what you have to play by kind of if you want to win, at least in this one. Mm-hmm. I just want to know, and someone from the chat already kind of mentioned this, does that include then things like the New York primary and shady stuff in Arizona? Does that count as rigging? And if so, does that fall on the DNC or Hillary Clinton?
Good call. Good catch. So let's talk about the people who were purged. That's something totally different. I'm talking about the rules of the conventions, the rules of these conferences where they can literally assert their authority by the rules that they created. But the purge in New York City, that is still under investigation. The ridiculous lines and the purging that took place in Arizona, so that falls into the category of something that needs to be investigated, and there's investigations going on. Thank you for bringing that up. Let me make this very clear. When I say the game being rigged, I'm talking about their rules and their structure from the very order of the primaries. The states that go first in the entire South that comes immediately after Iowa and New Hampshire, it is intentionally built that way to help protect the status quo structure that the Democratic Party established about 35 years ago now. That's one thing. The second thing is the superdelegates. They put that into play simply so that they could override, do exactly what they're doing right now. Exactly what they're doing right now is throughout this entire primary season, they have been giving the impression that Hillary Clinton is further ahead than Bernie Sanders has been. But that's not rigging the system. That's their twisted backwards rules, right, that they established years ago, right? So, and then, of course, the committee woman, the chairwoman, asserting her unchallengeable authority over and above the people, the voice of the people. That is a part of their rule system. So we are fighting on two ends, right? We're fighting some very direct suppression of voting by these purges that just happened to happen in New York, right, in Brooklyn, right? Was it 144,000 people in Brooklyn got purged right before the primary in New York, right? And then you have what's going on in Arizona. So, but no, thank you for making that clarification, or making me make that clarification. But we're definitely fighting on two different fronts. And here's the deal. I want to focus on me personally. I want us to focus proactively on the things that can be changed, right? With the voter suppression, if you didn't catch it beforehand, you were being reactive after the fact. You had to play catch up because you didn't know ahead of time, right? The voter suppression is something that lawyers need to get involved in, and it was something that happened, and a lot of people got blindsided by it, but it was the only thing you could do is react. And whenever you're put in a position where you have to react to something, you stand a good chance of not winning that. But with the rules that they've used to abuse the grassroots movement and this progressive movement, that's something that we can proactively address starting now. For the next time around, we can't retroactively change their rules. We can't have a reactionary response and expect them to change their rules. That it's too late, right? But to see it change in the future, and whether you do that or not, a lot of people are just saying, well, hell, I'll never have anything to do with the Democratic Party again. Fair enough, and that's your prerogative. Go for it. But the problem is, what happens when 8 years comes around or 16 years comes around and there's another progressive candidate trying to run up against the same damn rules that screwed Bernie Sanders up the first time, and all of the people who saw it and witnessed it, they basically just took a step back, erased their D's, became independents, and did nothing to change the rules for the next go round. Now, that may not be your strategy. Your strategy may be, I'm going to help build the Green Party, and we're going to make sure they get 5% in this next election so they can get federal funding, and that's the route we're going to go. Whatever route you choose, my brothers and my sisters, go and be about your business. Go get it done. Whatever route you choose, whatever is going to make you feel like you're being true to yourself, get it done. And let's not be reactionary, and let's not get caught off guard by their rules again. Why complain about their rules when we can help, and not even help? Why complain about their rules when we can write the rules for ourselves? The DLC, listen, the DLC is responsible for the rules that are screwing us up 30 years later. You realize that? With some variations. The superdelegates, the Southern strategy, all of that is baked into the system courtesy of the DLC. This has been a long game. They have been playing a long game on us. And I'm afraid that a lot of us are just reactionary, and we're not taking the long game. We're doing the short game. And they have been able to run over us, this progressive movement. They haven't been able to suppress this. They haven't been able to silence this progressive movement. But electorally, they've been able to run over this progressive movement because of their rules and because of some voter suppression, which, again, to be redundant, please allow me a moment to be redundant, because I need to drive the fact home. When you're fighting from a reactionary position, chances are you cannot change the result and the outcome. You have to be proactive against look how long they've been working on this, man. Look at how long this has been a long game in changing the dynamic of the Democratic Party from being a progressive movement. It's actually, I said 35 years. It's more closely to 45 years. They have been playing a very long game, and a lot of us are reactionary because we haven't been participatory in that game. And then those of us who got in the game got co-opted by the game, and it's just one big cluster F, if you ask me. But the fact remains is that the rules that a lot of people are complaining about from Nevada are definitely rules that they voted on years ago and voted themselves. You have to understand, it's not, these parties are not, they're not noble institutions that are going to do the democratic thing, small d. They are private institutions that are going to do whatever it takes to protect their power. And so what that means, making rules that are very draconian, making rules that are very authoritarian, the complete antithesis of democracy, they will do it because it has every institution has a interest in self-preservation. And so we shouldn't be surprised by this. I think that's what I'm trying to drive home. Don't be surprised that this system is set up to ward off progressive movements, because this particular Democratic Party, this iteration of the Democratic Party, was set up by a third-way Democrat leadership council that was intent on suppressing the progressive movement. I hope I made myself clear and made that clarification for you guys. So no, I don't lump into that the shenanigans of this voter suppression, but I lump every single electoral hurdle that they put in place, whether or not your primary is open or closed. That is a rule that has been established in almost every state at least a year prior to that primary. Those are rules that are there intentionally because they know in that local election how effective independents can be in challenging the establishment. Rules like that. All right, 857-600-0518. I want to get one more caller in before I speak to Matt Bruenig. We're going to be talking about some of his articles that he's written on his personal site, mattbruenig.com, particularly about the the treatment of the white working class, and the soft hands approach on, or the engagement, the willingness to engage the African American community on issues for which many white liberals think black people are bigoted, particularly LGBTQ rights, right? So you have this interesting. Well, I don't want to give it away. I don't want to give it away. I'm going to talk to him shortly. And so before I talk to him, this is a good spot as any to tell you to subscribe to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I want you to click on the subscribe button below. And if you're listening via Spreaker, I want you to go to the top right-hand corner and click the follow button. And if you like what we're doing, we want you to go to progressivearmy.com or thebenjamindixonshow.com and register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. Become a patron. Go to patreon.com/the BPD show and chip in, support the Benjamin Dixon Show. Buy me a bottle of water, chip in $1 a month, and to help forward independent progressive media. All right. And while I do that, I want to thank two of our latest patrons. Here we go. This is what I want right here. Two of our latest patrons to come on as of last night. I want to thank Robert. Robert, thank you very much for your monthly donation. And I also want to thank James. James just pledged tonight in the middle of the show, or right before the show. So James R., thank you very much for your donation. Carlton, thank you for your pledge. And one more that I saw that came through at like 3 o'clock in the morning that I'm like, I had to remember to give this guy Robert. I already said Robert. I got the name right the first time. Robert, thank you for your pledge on Patreon. It's because of people like you that we actually can do the things that we can do. All right, enough of that already. All right, I'm going to go straight to this interview. I want to talk to Matt Bruenig because we had a hell of a conversation going on in our messages on Twitter, dealing with some of his articles. And we see this going on. And actually, I want to talk to him about a little feud that he had today with Joan Walsh. First of all, Matt, how are you doing, man?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks so much for joining us. And before I do too much, I know a little bit about your bio. I don't have a lot about your bio because you're an elusive man on the interwebs. But I do know that you are, of course, you write at mattbruenig.com, and you're also a policy analyst for demos.org or .com.
Demos.org is the website.
Yeah. So. Awesome. So anything else you want to tell us about yourself, or you want to just jump into this conversation?
They don't care what my bio is. Let's just go into the talk.
All right. So I'm talking with Matt Bruenig, and I had a chance to read. I've been reading your blog a lot lately because I like that it's succinct, it's to the point, and it's data driven, and very pragmatic. And the articles that got my attention the most recently were the articles that you're doing on how white liberals and progressives treat the white working class. And they reject the white working class because they view the white working class as racist and bigots. And so they essentially demonize them. Whereas if you do the equitable thing, you would do the same thing to every group that you can categorize that is a bigot, right? That have bigoted tendencies. And you compared it to the treatment that the progressive and the establishment, how they treat African Americans who are overwhelmingly conservative when it comes to LGBTQ rights and marriage equality. All right. And so on the one hand, you have progressives who are shunning the white working class because they're bigots and they're racist. But those same exact people, they don't shun African Americans, even though they're homophobic and bigoted. They embrace them. Tell me a little bit more about that premise and what you found.
So, yeah, I mean, you summarized it pretty well. What I was interrogating was some pieces at Salon and Slate and Freddie DeBoer and Above the Line, there was this discussion online that maybe the West Virginia primary prompted
Yep.
that was kind of, saying, oh, well, white working class, lower class whites are racist. And the upshot almost being, to hell with them, they have these problems. And of course, that's true. I think upper class whites are racist as well, but there's no denying that lower class whites have racism issues, and that's a problem, and we got to figure that out. But that doesn't mean to me that, well, your problems don't matter if you're, like we've seen mortality for like middle class whites, go way up because of obesity and drug abuse and suicide, and we've seen stagnant wages and poverty and all these kinds of things. Like, those are still problems, even if the people who experience those problems might have views that we see as problematic. And as an analogy to that, I said, look at, the African American community. The poll in 2015 opposed gay marriage 2-1. And liberals would call that sort of homophobic and really problematic. But we don't say, hey, obviously it's not good that black people are getting mowed down by police and locked up and are, some of the poorest people in the country and job discrimination. I mean, just the whole gamut. We don't say, well, you don't care about gays, I don't care about you and your problems. That's not something we do.
But that's something we readily do with the white working class, and we say that, oh, we don't care about your economic plight because you're a racist bigot.
Right. And in one of my last posts, there was a brief moment where I was trying to figure out, what's going on here, beneath the surface. What we have this seeming contradiction. Is there some way to resolve this contradiction and explain why there's this different treatment? And the idea I threw out there, which was actually proposed to me by Emmett Renson of Vox, was that, well, basically this is almost a kind of political tribal calculation. The understanding is that lower class whites certainly vote more Republican than Democrat, and lower class blacks almost all vote Democrat. And so, when someone in your family, of your political family, basically has problematic issues, you try to deal with them and maybe try to persuade them, but you don't cast them out. Someone who's not in your family, maybe you're a little bit more willing to, be like, I don't care about your problems,
Yeah, and so as I was reading that, I'm like, I saw a roadblock. I saw multiple roadblocks why progressives have not turned on black people, right? Because one, progressives and liberals have for years used the language of racism against conservatives, right? We've cast this well laid out narrative of the Republican Party just being batshit racist. And it's not just a narrative. Some of them are very much so racist. But it seems like a roadblock that you're going to run into as soon as you say anything about a black person, because for the last 8 years, if you had any criticism of Barack Obama, you were a racist. So likewise, it would be extremely difficult for any progressive, LGBTQ or otherwise, to condemn the black community for their overly conservative views in regards to gay rights and LGBT and marriage equality, because it will instantly, you are running up against the somehow being called a racist. So to me, that was the first hurdle in a justification as to why, LGBTQ activists and just progressives in general who aren't even gay or lesbian would never cross the black community in that way. And I like what you wrote, what you got from the gentleman at Vox, that the other side of that coin, in my opinion, is that it's a very calculated game, that they are willing to suffer this. They're willing to suffer something that they would consider bigoted for the sake of electoral expediency. What does that say to you? What do you think about that on a moral level, maybe, but even if just a pragmatic philosophical level?
Well, so one of the things that's interesting about that theory, if we suppose that theory is correct, and it seems plausible, there's the secondary question of how conscious are they of this? Because motivations operate on a often subconscious level. So I don't know that they.
Actively doing this.
Yeah, like I suspect it's just, you know, they don't say, oh, well, we need blacks to vote for us, so we got to kind of soft pedal this. Instead they build sort of justifications in their own mind. And you saw that a little bit with some of the stuff I quoted from 2008 when you had the Prop 8 stuff where
Right.
there was just sort of all this text that was like, we need to reach out to them more. And you know what? We haven't dealt with their issues. The LGBT community is not dealing with racism. We have racism in our own ranks. We're not dealing, there was all this sort of language that came out that, you know, allowed you to resolve that without just being like, well, we need blacks to vote for Democrats,
Right.
but we want to get gay rights. Maybe we can hold out, which is ultimately what they did, and we can get it through the courts or something. And I don't think it's calculated on that level. It's probably just resolved on
On
a
a
more
quick-
subconscious level.
I think, maybe you're giving them, however you want to. I think some people are doing this straight out calculation, right? And
I think
here-
it's cynical.
I'm more cynical than you are, right? So I think some of them are making that calculation because they know black people. To be honest with you, there's a lot of black people who are just one racist comment away from becoming Republican. I've actually heard many African Americans say this. If it wasn't for the racism of the Republican Party, they would become Republicans. So I think that there is a very calculated estimation on the part of some thought leaders and some political leaders on the Democratic side to say that we can't cross the African American community on this issue, because if we do, we will run them directly into the arms of the Republican Party. Now, that's just coming from my perspective of being in years in the black church, years in the black politics, and just knowing that there's a good percentage of African Americans who are very, very conservative, and the only reason they are not in the Republican Party is because they view the Republicans as being racist. But I want to come up for air a little bit, because the real conversation that I think you're having, and correct me if I'm wrong, the real conversation that you're having with these articles, this series of articles on how we demonize the white working class, but we engage African Americans, even though we both have our groups have our own versions of bigotry. And this is not anecdotal. This is based on polling, our rejection of LGBTQ rights and marriage equality specifically. So it's not just this casual observation that you're making up. This is in the data. Black people are not pro-gay overwhelmingly. But I think the conversation that you're having is really shining a light on this, and forgive this class term, but this bourgeois white liberal who really has a condescending gaze on people who are they feel and view are lower than them. And they can express this condescension towards white working class people because electorally it doesn't cost them anything. But they couldn't possibly express this condescension towards poor black people because electorally it cost them their ass. That's the subtext that I read in your articles. Or am I reading too deeply into it?
That's I had not contemplated that, but that doesn't seem implausible to me. I mean, I grew up in Texas, and I was lower class white, and the upper class whites, they were definitely very racist, and they also didn't like white trash, as they termed it, and they certainly seemed more willing to publicly talk about white trash and how they didn't like that than they did racism. Though I would say they were equally hateful of both. So when you hear some of when you see some of the things they talk about with lower class whites, they're uneducated or uncultured or whatever, right? There seems to be this they like NASCAR and crappy beer and they watch, stupid shows and there's this sense, you know, you could say similar things if you wanted. I mean, that's just the nature of being lower class in societies. You have different cultural habits. You have less education. That's true of white people. That's true of poor black people. That's true of poor Latino people. They're living in different worlds, culturally and educationally. And so anything you're saying about poor white people, you could probably say about most poor black people when it comes to sort of lack of quote unquote sophistication and that kind of thing. So maybe maybe they just have disdain across the board for that lack of sophistication, like you said, and just feel comfortable when it comes to lower class whites.
Yeah, but think about it. You can absolutely say, let's just think culturally right now in 2016. Right now, it wouldn't cost me a thing to get out here and say that white racist trailer park trash, right? It might cost me a little bit because I'm trying to do this little show, right? It might cost me just a little. But if a white person who's just as progressive as me comes out and say, just switch out trailer park trash and say ghetto trash, holy shit, that's the end of their career. So even on a cultural level, if they have this condescension towards African Americans, who they view as bigoted anyway because we don't support LGBTQ rights and marriage equality more specifically, then it's something that they're culturally not able to really vent that anger that we see being vented towards poor white people and working class white people online and in the media and in print every single day. It's like a West Virginia opened up the floodgates of white progressives who absolutely loathe white poor people. What do you think?
Yeah, that's an excellent. You have persuaded me. I hadn't really considered that, but it's interesting to think from your perspective when you see people banging or beating up on white trash or whatever. To you in your brain, you're like, you know what? They probably think that of black people as well.
They're only one word. They're only one adjective away from saying it about me, right? So that's why
Right, yeah.
when I see, and I don't really have a better term, and I hate to be redundant, but when I see bourgeois white, let me stop there, white liberals, jumping down the throats of poor white people, many of whom I grew up next to, I know for a fact that kind of condescension is really only one adjective away from describing and being not describing but being applied to me. So I don't get when I see it done towards white poor people, I don't co-sign. And this is me. I'm just an oddball, right? I think there's some black people who co-sign on this, right? Because it helps them alleviate the fact that we have been oppressed for many years. But for me, it's like, no, if this white person is going to be this hateful and mean towards this poor white person, then they are just a closed one door, behind smoke closed doors from talking about me in the same way. And so I just feel that they can't publicly express this, but they express it when I walk by and they lock their doors or they clutch their purse, and they're supposed to be a post-racial society. So, and this is what I read. I mean, honestly, when I read your work, this is what it start piecing together. So I thought that's what you were working towards in many ways. And actually, I honestly think that's what you may not be expressly saying, but the subtext of what you're saying really pieces that together for me. I'm sorry, but go ahead and just talk a little bit more about that. And I want to also talk about some of the questions you were saying about how long this coalition can actually last when we have a coalition of people who are well-to-do and wealthy, and they're very suspicious of tax hikes, even for the purposes of programs that would help people in this coalition.
Sure. So one of the odd realities of U.S. politics is that the working class or lower class types are split across the parties in not even proportion, but they're not able to form a bloc in one party altogether, which is what you see in other countries, in the Nordic countries, which are the ones that I study. Certainly in the middle of the 20th century, almost everyone, if you were a laborer, a lower class laborer or a pensioner or whatever, you were in the Social Democratic Party, period.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were management or whatever, you were in the sort of right wing party. And if you were a farmer, they had like this farmers party, and they usually teamed up with the Social Democrats. Like there was a very clear coalition, and you could understand how everyone in those parties, how their interests meld. In the U.S., we have these weird parties where the Democrats have a lot of upper scale white people who are mostly socially liberal, but really are not that interested in upping taxes, and they're kind of Bloomberg types almost. And then you also just have a lot of poor people, especially black people and Latinos, but also some poor whites, a decent, I mean, we say that, poor whites are racist and they all vote for Republicans, but, really it's 30, 40%, 30% of them will vote for Democrats. That's 1 in 3. It's not nobody,
Right.
especially since whites are such a big portion of the overall population. And it's just this weird tension, and it's hard to see going forward how that's just going to play out, because and Ross Douthat, of all people, was actually making this point on Twitter yesterday. The culture war stuff in some ways seems won. We have the transgender stuff still ahead of us, but that almost looks like for sure that's going to be won. It's not going to be a 20-year battle to have gender-neutral bathrooms. And so once you get past that point, what is it that binds, lower class, especially people of color, to upper class whites who are interested in social liberalism but don't? There's no social liberalism to be got. It's already been got. So what are you going to do? Once the Republican kind of cleans out and becomes less, anti-gay or whatever, are you going to see them go over to the Republicans? Are they going to be more appealing to Republicans? I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on how the coalition would change?
I think the coalition is changing before our eyes right now. For that exact reason, because you have the rest of us, right? You have the working class, and not just the working class, but like the lower middle class and those who just live in paycheck to paycheck. A lot of us are waking up to the fact that the Democratic Party is not really doing anything for us economically, but protecting and securing those who make enough money to not want any additional tax hikes and not have any need for government programs for assistance, even if it's some type of student loan forgiveness. They make enough money. They've already paid off their student loans, right? So we're in a coalition that's not tenable economically. And you're right. Like, what happens when it's over socially, and all of these social bigots are pariah, right? So there's really going to be no reason for us to have this coalition. I think that's already started, because the way the Democratic Party has had to use everything and the kitchen sink to oppose Bernie Sanders, they have publicly, in my opinion, gone against any economic populism. Like, they have completely derided the concept of economic populism to the detriment of their party, and now to the realization for the rest of us to say, it's time for something different, or it's time for us to overtake this party, or it's time to do something, but we can't sit in this coalition quietly anymore. And the irony of it is, Donald Trump is helping to expedite this by pushing away those Republicans who are not social pariah, who are not,
Yes.
He's pushing them like the plague out of the Republican Party over into the Democratic Party. And now that's the party that should have existed in the first place, right? As you compare it to the Nordic countries, the party and it's not true to history, but just kind of by virtue of the names, historically it was the Democratic Republican Party, or the Republican Democratic Party. I forgot which one was first, but they were together originally. And now it seems like it's time for them to get back together because economically economically, they're on the same page in many ways, give or take a few percentage points on the top marginal rate. Socially, they are merging, and Donald Trump is purging the Republican Party on that. And foreign policy, they are consistent on this either a straight neoconservative policy or a soft neoconservative policy, but it's still a neoconservative foreign policy. So they have more in common than they would ever have with working class black people or working class white people who really are saying we're struggling. So to answer your question, I think it's happening right now before our eyes, and it's really being helped by Hillary Clinton being so far to the right and Donald Trump pushing those people who were just close to center. They're pushing them into the arms of Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, the Donald Trump point is an interesting one. It's hard for me to think about how that's going to shake out. So the analysts say, that Donald might push, you might like business conservatives, or they always use suburban white women who are making, $150 a year or something. They'll go over into the Democratic Party, and because they can't deal with ban Muslims and that's
they can't go that
too
far.
Much for them.
Right. They can't go far as building a wall. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. But then that changes the Democratic composition, because now you have even more of that sort of upper class Bloomberg type that is in the coalition, and now you got to deal with those people, and how are you going to keep those people in once Donald gets out of the way? You got to keep ramping up the idea that we're never going to raise taxes on anyone, making less than $1 million or whatever. It's going to become even more precarious if the Dems expand their coalition by bringing those people in.
But it's going to become precarious for those of us further to the left who are demanding that the government actually promote the general welfare, right? Those of us who are saying use our tax dollars to make a better society, even for people who are on the margins economically. It's precarious for us, but I think we've already found that it's already precarious just by virtue of this primary.
Yeah. I mean, in the long run, in the short run, there's this issue of if they can bring those Donald Trump, the people who are repulsed by him over, then they can ignore the left even more, because they're able to build on that right wing of the party. But then in the long run, all the young people of all stripes are basically for Bernie and Bernie-style politics. And they're only going to become more and more influential as they age, and so there's this real tension that's going to build, I think, and I don't know how they're going to deal with that. And it might be the only way to resolve that tension is a realignment where the Republican Party becomes, less racist and less socially conservative, and then that brings a lot of Democrats over, including maybe even upper class Latinos and black people and that kind of thing, who are, maybe more fiscally conservative and that kind of thing.
Yep. I think you said something in there that really jumped out to me, and I started reading a note from my producer. Damn it, David, you threw me off, David. I was listening. Hell, shit, I done forgot now, man. But I agree. I think with everything that you just said. But I think the realignment is happening now, and I think it started not just because of the people running from the Republican Party, but it started because the Democratic Party had to pull out all of the stops to suppress this progressive movement. And that included going against things that have been in the standard lexicon for the Democrats, right? They've gone against it so much that, in a way, for those that are actively engaged, right? There's a whole lot of people who don't know what the hell is going on right now. But those who are actively engaged, you see that the Democrats have turned coat on single payer. They've turned coat on, hell, they already got rid of and gutted welfare. Obama himself gutted food stamps by $8 billion or so, give or take $1 billion. We've seen them do it progressively, and that's the wrong word to use there. We've seen them do it incrementally over the last 30, 40 years, but in this election alone, they have had to damn all of these progressive ideas and rewrite what it means to be a progressive just to beat this movement that Bernie Sanders put together. So I think the real question, and I want to get your give you the last word and get your feedback on this thought. I think the real question is how Bernie Sanders supporters, millennials, young people, and the older people who support Bernie Sanders, how effective can they be electorally? Because if they can form a coalition outside of the mainstream and be effective electorally, then that would solidify this this theorized realignment that we're discussing.
Yeah, and that's really the $1 million question, I guess. When the campaign ends, a lot of people may disengage and the whole thing just kind of fizzles out. Or I guess the consensus seems to be that the next move is to kind of go locally and use our sort of activist energy to overwhelm the party and local races and stuff like that, where people are maybe paying less attention. And I don't know. I have no idea if that's going to happen or not. Bernie's kind of old, so, if the Bernie brand, I don't know how long the Bernie brand's going to be here to coordinate people. But, right now it seems like he's able to kind of point people at candidates and it just like shoots a money gun at them every time he does it. So that's kind of promising if that's able to last, because if Bernie can basically curate candidates and people trust his judgment on that, then we might be able to swing some primaries and get some good people in there to slowly build the movement. Sort of Tea Party style, I guess, is the way that.
Well, they already call
people.
us. They already call us Tea Party, the Tea Party of the
yeah.
Yep.
We're
Matt,
the Tea Party left. But hey, they were effective.
Exactly. Don't discount your enemy just because you don't like them. They had effective strategies, but that's a whole different conversation I want to have with you on another day. Matt, listen, thanks so much for joining me. Tell everybody, I mean, you have like, 250,000 followers, so they probably already follow you, but tell everybody how to find you and get up with you online.
All right, thanks so much.
Oh, you must. Okay, I think there's some lag going on here. I wanted you to give give us a shout out in terms of where to find you. Where can they find you online? Give them your Twitter handle.
Sorry. It's just Matt Bruenig, Bruenig, Matt Bruenig, at Matt Bruenig at twitter.com. That's probably where I spend most of my time.
All right, Matt. Hey, thanks so much for joining me, man.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, folks. I just got word that there's some lag going on. So I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry if you missed any portions of that conversation, because it was, trust me, that was a great conversation. That's the conversation in terms of where do we go from here. That's the conversation in terms of, I don't know. It's just a lot of stuff. But so anyway, I want to take a minute and at the end of the show here, and I want to talk about Brother Malcolm X, El Haj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X. The reason I want to talk about him, obviously, but besides today that it was his birthday, he was born May 19th, 1925, born as Malcolm Little. Malcolm Little was his given name. He converted to the Nation of Islam, and they gave him the name of Malcolm X, El Haj Malik El Shabazz. Malcolm has been, I think, one of the most influential people in my life, period, just across the board. Between Malcolm and James Baldwin, the two of them have really shaped me and my thinking. And it's interesting that a lot of people reject Malcolm because of his militancy, but they really neglected to understand the cause and the root source of his militancy. And what fascinates me about him, besides his rhetorical prowess, because Malcolm was a speaker extraordinaire, right? I can listen to his speeches for hours on end. Besides his rhetorical prowess, was his willingness to self-examine and to have his own personal dialectic, where you can see his growth. You can see the arc of his character development, for lack of a better phrase, and where he started off in one place, but he wasn't afraid to challenge his own fundamental beliefs, the things that he believed all of his life, and then the things he believed since he joined the Nation of Islam. He was willing to challenge all of that because he found a new, greater knowledge, a knowledge of self and the knowledge of his place in this universe. And he was able to communicate that to so many people. And when I listen to him, it just forges, it causes the synapses in my brain to fire, both from a militancy perspective, but also from a human perspective, from a humanist perspective, the ability to see the humanity in each other, no matter how angry we may be deep down, no matter how we have been oppressed and challenged. Malcolm was able to see the greater humanity, and he grew into that. And that's something that we don't see in many, many people. Most people remain static after a certain period in their life. But Malcolm kept growing after his journey to Mecca, his pilgrimage to Mecca. He was able to completely transform his perspective of the world. And so as I listen to him speak, he's able to communicate to me in a way that reminds me of, or not even reminds me, but teaches me of what it was to be proud and to be black, right? Despite the self-hatred that many of us are born with, and maybe born with is the wrong phrase, but we're born into this self-hatred. And so Malcolm was this guy who not only had this rhetorical skill set where he could so easily explain something with 140 characters, right? He was able to succinctly hit the issue on the head, and just with 10 words, he could cause a revelation and a revolution in your mind. And this was who Malcolm was. And to people who were born into this oppressive society and they felt as though they hated themselves, Malcolm said to them, he said, "Who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin? Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your heads to the sole of your feet?" And then he questioned and said, "Before you come asking me about whether or not we teach hate, ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God made you?" Malcolm had a way of speaking directly to the heart of the issue of people who were broken. But then he also spoke directly to the heart of the issue of the system that was doing the breaking. Malcolm was the one who saw the role of the media long before this modern day analysis that said before 2016, he said exactly what we would be seeing in 2016. He said, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. This was Brother Malcolm. And this is why he's been so influential. And this is why we must honor him. And he understood the political spin that we're fighting against right now. He called a particular politician out of Los Angeles. He said that this politician, Mayor Sam Yorty, is a professional liar who has mastered the art of using half-truths. Brother Malcolm, El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. And I think the best tribute to Malcolm are his own words, but also the words of Ossie Davis, who eulogized him. He said, "There will be those who consider it their duty to tell us to revile him, to flee, even from the presence of his memory, to save ourselves by writing him out the history books of our turbulent times. Many will ask what we find to honor in this stormy, controversial, and bold young captain. And we will answer them and say, did you ever talk to Brother Malcolm? Did you ever touch him or have him smile at you? Did you ever really listen to him? Because if you did, you would know. You would know him. And if you knew him, you would understand why we must honor him.
We declare our right on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary.